Sienna God, hello all, Osha, Sahi, good evening, and Wado, thank you for watching. Today is day 58 of Transformation of America, the True Life Story of a CIA Mind Control Slave by Kathy O'Brien with Mark Phillips. And we are working our way through chapter 29, The Lizard of Oz, AHS, of Kathy's story. When I read it in a mirror, it appeared as though I were on the wrong side of the mirror and needed to step through, in parentheses, according to Alice in Wonderland / NASA programming. It also clearly indicated to those in the know that I was under my control. Bird looked at his pocket watch, prompting a wave of terror in me, and said in Wonderland cryptic, "We're late. As the elevator drops down the rabbit hole, we'll reverse time in order to get there a few minutes early." Bird spun me around to face the elevator's mirrored door, saying, "Look deep into the mirror and be all that you can be by becoming infinitely lost in all that you see." Bird timed his hypnotic induction so that when he ordered "step through the mirror," the doors opened and we stepped through. As the elevator supposedly went down 99, in parentheses taken from Aquino's corny reversal of sixes, levels to the depths of hell, Bird told me the earth spins faster and faster at the core, causing us to spiral downward in a tornado effect. I dropped deeper in my hypnotic trance. The elevator doors opened to what appeared to be to me as an exact replica of the floor we just left. However, this floor's hallway led to a computer room and sanitized looking lab area. Several of the scientists working there were amused by our hats. Prompting Bird to ham up his comedic act, Bird ignored the fact that these NASA workers, like many others, may have deliberately stroked his entertainer's ego because they relied on his appropriations for funding. Bird made me robotically announce to the workers, "He's taking me to your leader." "I'm the commander here," the apparent director of the underground lab said. The workers again busied themselves as he stood, arms folded defensively across his chest, while his bespectacled, intelligent eyes darted the room, surveying the situation. The commander had a few gray strands salting his short, dark hair, yet his build was surprisingly youthful and trim for his age. He and Bird apparently knew each other quite well. Bird strode over to him, dragging me along. "Tom," Bird called to his 50-ish, 6'1", 6'1" friend. "This is your specimen of the day that I promised I would deliver. I will be most interested to see what YOUO can deliver, since diplomatic relations with Mexico depends on it. Not that I want to increase any pressure you may feel, but we need 7 more just like her to stuff in the mouth of his royal lizardry," in parentheses, de la Madrid, "to keep him from spilling his guts on the project." "It's just as well, my friend," the commander said, stroking his chin without uncrossing his arms. "That way he can't talk without implicating himself." "That's the way the chief feels about it," Bert agreed. "He's already in deep anyway, but this order, in brackets, for slaves, hits him closer to home since they'll be serving him personally." We walked to a clinical sanitized area that had a maze of small rooms where I was undressed and prepped for the lab. A nurse of sorts injected me with a NASA tranquility drug and instructed me to put my lab coat back on. "Walk this way," she ordered as she led me down the hall, swinging her hips in an exaggerated manner. I immediately complied. The tranquility drug had no recreational effects, but produced an attitude of peaceful compliance to all orders given. As we approached the theater-type lab, a small group of men who would be in attendance were talking with Bird and the so-called commander. They looked at us and laughed at my literal compliance to walk like the nurse. I was then led by the commander to backstage entrance, which was actually a glass encased lab surrounded by seats in ascending rows. Scientists in NASA lab coats looked down on the lab table where I lay as the commander wired me up to a computerized machine. A camera was positioned high in one corner of the room, filming all that transpired. I was aware through conversations between Bird and the commander that De La Madrid had requested a video of the latest advancements in mind control technique being used to create his 7 slaves. In reality, the camera was filming scientific methodisms, salted with comic misinformation, as a humorous no to his request. Since I was considered used up and my death was imminent, the commander told his scientists to feel free to F the lab specimen. What? "But first," he said, "before you satisfy your mental and physical curiosities, sampling the president's, in brackets, Reagan's wares, we must satisfy El Presidente's, in brackets De La Madrid's perverse intellect with a little space humor. He turned to one of the technical workers and said, "You're going to have to edit this tape for De La Madrid's benefit and take this part out while we prepare her for an off-color chameleon joke." A lab lizard encased in a glass test tube of sorts was inserted in my vagina. What? The camera was focused on the area while my legs were spread in a birthing position, acting as though I had conceived while having sex with De La Madrid. The commander said, "Now, for the first finished product," which in layman's terms equates to the reproductive offspring of a lizard breeding machine. He dramatically snapped on a rubber glove and probed me as though he were giving me a gynecological exam. In fact, he was opening the trap door of the lizard's tube to turn him out very slowly. The sluggish lizard poked his head out of my vagina and crawled out onto the metal table. "This concludes all of the experimentation demonstration of the cloning of a presidential model," the commander said. What? I apparently had been selected as a prototype for the 7 program slaves De La Madrid had requested. De La Madrid was interested in NASA program slaves that would be vaginally mutilated like I was. He was sexually obsessed with the hideous carving. Ugh. I had no way of knowing what, if any, technological advances were actually provided to De La Madrid via the film. I only know that deliberate misinformation tainted the methodologies depicted, and that I had never experienced programming or testing before or at the time by any such methods. This video, created for his royalty lizardry, was one of many cryptic lizard themes that NASA used in its Mexican operations. All of my programmed roles in Mexico involved the prolific local iguana lizards. De La Madrid had relayed the legend of the iguana to me, explaining that lizard-like aliens had descended upon the Mayans. The Mayan pyramids, their advanced astronomical technology, including the sacrifice of virgins, was supposedly inspired by the lizard aliens. He told me that when the aliens interbred with the Mayans to produce a form of life they could inhabit, they fluctuated between a human and iguana appearance through chameleon-like abilities, a perfect vehicle for transforming into world leaders. De La Madrid claimed to have Mayan/alien ancestry in his blood, whereby he transformed back into an iguana at will. De La Madrid produced a hologram similar to the one Bush did in his "You Are What You Read" initiation. His hologram of lizard-like tongue and eyes produced the illusion that he was transforming into an iguana. While in Mexico, I was always ordered to wait by rocks where the abundant iguana sunned before being ported to my scheduled meetings with his royal lizardry, the Lizard of Oz, AHS. This stuff is crazy. Like, my God, like, just when you think it can't get any weirder, right? Chapter 30, in the interest of time and space, Senator Patrick Leahy, Leahy, Democrat, Vermont, who served as a vice chairman of the U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee in 1985 to 86, was a friend of Senator Byrd. Leahy's position on Byrd's Senate Appropriations Committee, coupled with his former position in intelligence, afforded him an inordinate amount of power and influence. While I had cause to have contact with Senator Leahy on numerous occasions, Kelly was apparently more familiar with him than I. This was evidenced by our meeting with him in Vermont in the late summer of 1985. Alex Houston was booked to entertain at the State Fair in Rutland, Vermont. The entire trip proved to be a whirlwind of covert activity for me, during which time I obtained a packet of papers from an unidentified operative with orders to hand deliver them to Senator Leahy. Kelly had been kept as busy as I, since Boxcar Willie and other CIA operative pedophiles were in abundance at the fair in Leahy's home state. President Reagan had given me specific orders to carry out while in Vermont, which included delivering a message to Patrick for him. He also told me, when you go to Vermont, be sure and go by, and then in parentheses, it says BUYLL Bean. Oh, God. Literally interpreting what he suggested, I asked, the whole store? No, Reagan laughed. I meant stop by there. I didn't mean buy the whole store. I already own it. Just buy a few things like an LL Bean Swiss Army knife. And here's a footnote right quick. Black LL Bean Swiss Army knives were a coded indicator of White House level operations. Red LL Bean Swiss Army knives and regular Swiss Army knives were a standard CIA indicator with which I was also familiar. Okay. When Reagan said he already owned LL Bean, I thought he was referring to the amount of shopping he did there. He wore LL Bean shirts, sweaters, and slippers, slept on LL Bean flannel sheets in his LL Bean pajamas, and carried his presidential black LL Bean Swiss Army knife with which he cleaned his fingernails. But I learned the real significance of the Reagan statement when I stopped by the Vermont LL Bean outlet on the final day of Houston's lengthy Vermont State Fair engagement. The LL Bean outlet, located near the top of the supposedly the highest mountain in the pristine forest, appeared to be a storefront for CIA covert activity. When I asked the clerk assigned to Kelly and me for a black Swiss Army knife, his response was indicative of familiarity with government covert operations. Using the old familiar statement, in parentheses trigger, he ordered Kelly and me to walk this way as he led us through a storage area and out the back door. There, a black unmarked helicopter was waiting on a pad for us. The pilot flew us a short distance to the top of the mountain, where we landed in a clearing next to a house that appeared to have no other access. The place was run like a fortress, and 2 guards in suits met us as Kelly and I emerged from the helicopter. The guards escorted us into the house, keeping Kelly while I met with Senator Leahy. I walked into an office-type room that had a panoramic view of the wilderness, where Leahy was leaning against a highly polished wooden desk. He was wearing an orange flannel shirt that lost its purpose and crispiness. Okay. It was my experience that Leahy's surroundings, like his appearance, were as sanitized as possible. I delivered the documents and messages ordered. Leahy then proceeded to explain that he was aware that my death was imminent due to my groundwork participation in NAFTA, and that subsequently Kelly would be traded to the West Coast pornography operation. What? Not only did he obviously want to join in on using me up before my 30th birthday, but he had tracks to cover up where Kelly was concerned. Okay. We'll leave it there. Dan the kohen kagay, we nagashas kay to again, love you, mean it.